He is the undisputed savior of modern cinema, the chosen one who dodged bullets in a digital dystopia, and the unstoppable, black-suited assassin who took down entire criminal empires to avenge a single dog. The world knows his remarkably ageless face, his breathtaking physical dedication, and his reputation as the absolute kindest man in industry famous for its cruelty. But there's a heavy, staggering truth hiding behind the billion-dollar franchises, a reality that the cameras could never fully capture. At 61 years old, Keanu Reeves is a man who was systematically broken by the universe, carrying the unbearable weight of outliving almost everyone he ever truly loved. Behind the worldwide adoration stands a man whose brilliant best friend slipped away tragically on a cold Hollywood sidewalk, a father who had to bury his stillborn daughter, only to be forced, just 18 months later, to bury the absolute love of his life after a horrific crash. Keanu's life carries a sorrow so profound it would have destroyed a lesser man. How does the ultimate cinematic savior survive when he is completely powerless to save his own family in the real world? Why does an actor worth hundreds of millions of dollars choose to ride the public subway, give away his massive fortune, and live like a quiet ghost among the living? And what is the breathtaking cost of keeping your heart gentle when destiny has given you every reason to turn it into stone? Before we answer these questions, we must go back to the beginning. To understand the saint of Hollywood at 61, you must first know the boy who was abandoned in the dark. The broken foundation, the silent ice, and the deserting father. There is a comforting manufactured myth in Hollywood that superstars are born with clear, golden path laid out before them. We like to believe they belong to the glittering cities they eventually conquer. But the reality for the men who carry the deepest, most authentic gravity on screen is often far more chaotic. Some men are not born with roots. Some men are born in transit, carrying the heavy, unsettling knowledge that the ground beneath their feet is never permanent. Keanu Charles Reeves was born on September 2nd, 1964, in Beirut, Lebanon, the very geography of his birth. A city caught at the crossroads of different worlds, seemed to perfectly dictate the restless, drifting narrative of his early life. His mother, Patricia Taylor, was a fiercely independent English showgirl and costume designer. His father, Samuel Nowlin Reeves Jr., was a Hawaiian-born American with a complex heritage of Native Hawaiian, Chinese, English, and Portuguese descent. To the outside world, it sounded like a beautiful, exotic romance. But inside the walls of their home, a quiet, terrifying instability was already taking root. Samuel was a man consumed by profound, restless darkness. He was not built for the quiet, steady responsibilities of fatherhood. Instead of anchoring his family, he chased the chaotic, destructive shadows of his own impulses. When Keanu was just 3 years old, the fragile architecture of his family completely collapsed. His father packed his bags, walked out the front door, and simply never came back. He was eventually consumed by his own reckless choices, spiraling into a dark path that would eventually lead him to vanish behind the cold, unforgiving walls of state facility. He did not leave an explanation. He did not leave a forwarding address. He left a void. For a young boy, the sudden, unexplained disappearance of a father creates a very specific, invisible psychological wound. It teaches a child the most agonizing, terrifying lesson of human existence. The people who are supposed to protect you can simply choose to walk away. Reflecting on the heavy, bleeding scar left by his father's absence, Keanu later stripped away the armor of the Hollywood superstar and spoke with the unvarnished pain of an abandoned son. "The story with me and my dad's pretty heavy," Keanu quietly confessed in an interview, his voice carrying the weight of decades of unresolved grief. "It's full of pain and woe and loss and all that. It's not a pretty picture. It's full of pain and woe and loss." Listen to the staggering, tragic simplicity of those words. For the older audiences watching this, especially those who have had to raise children on their own, or those who still carry the phantom pain of an absent parent, that sentence is a devastating emotional strike. Keanu was not a child of privilege. He was a child of profound, echoing loss. Following the abandonment, his mother, Patricia, did everything in her power to keep the family afloat. They became nomads. They moved from Beirut to Sydney, Australia. From Sydney, they moved to the towering concrete canyons of New York City. And finally, they settled in the freezing gray winters of Toronto, Canada. By the time Keanu reached adolescence, he had attended 4 different high schools in 5 years. He was a perpetual new kid, the outsider, the boy who sat quietly in the back of the classroom, terrified to speak. But the constant uprooting was only half of the tragedy. Keanu was fighting a brutal, invisible war entirely inside his own mind. He suffered from severe dyslexia. In the 1970s, the educational system was not equipped with the compassion or the understanding it has today. To the teachers, a boy who struggled to read the words on a chalkboard was simply labeled as slow, lazy, or intellectually deficient. Imagine the sheer, suffocating humiliation of being called upon in front of 30 strangers, looking at a textbook and seeing the letters scramble and dance across the page like an unsolvable code. The classroom became an arena of daily, excruciating embarrassment. Because I had trouble reading, I wasn't a good student, Keanu recalled, describing the deep, isolating frustration of his youth. I was just a little too rambunctious. I was always getting in trouble. I didn't fit in. He was trapped. He could not rely on his father. He could not rely on the permanence of a hometown. And he could not rely on the academic system. So, the quiet, dyslexic boy from Toronto found exactly 2 places on Earth where the agonizing noise of the world finally went silent. The first was the ice rink. Keanu discovered ice hockey, and he played the most punishing, terrifying, and isolated position in the sport, the goalie. He earned the nickname The Wall. There is a breathtaking, profound psychological metaphor in this choice. Think about what a goalie actually does. He stands completely alone in the freezing cold, wearing a heavy mask, and willingly allows other people to fire frozen, rock-hard projectiles at his body. He takes the hits so his team can survive. For a teenager carrying a mountain of unspoken grief, the physical pain of blocking a hockey puck was a magnificent distraction. The ice was absolute. The rules were clear. If he guarded the net, he had value. He even dreamed of playing for Canadian Olympic team, finding a profound, meditative peace in the violent, freezing arena of the rink. But his second sanctuary was even more powerful. It was the theater. Despite his severe dyslexia, Keanu possessed a brilliant, incredibly sensitive emotional intelligence. He discovered that if he could not read the words gracefully, he could memorize them by listening. When he stepped onto a stage in a drama class and delivered the lines of a fictional character, the agonizing reality of being Keanu, the boy without a father, completely vanished. He could be someone powerful. He could be someone brave. He could be someone who didn't have a broken heart. Acting became his ultimate survival mechanism. At the age of 13, the universe offered him one final, tragic opportunity to find closure. He traveled to the island of Kauai in Hawaii to visit his estranged father, Samuel. It was a strained, incredibly uncomfortable reunion. They spent a few days together, surrounded by the beautiful, sun-drenched beaches of the Pacific. But the emotional chasm was simply too vast to bridge. When the visit ended, they said goodbye at the airport. It was a brief, sterile farewell. Keanu walked onto the plane, looking out the window at the man who had given him half of his DNA. He did not know at the time, but he would never, ever speak to his father again. The door was permanently, irreversibly closed. By the time he turned 17, Keanu made a definitive decision of his life. He dropped out of high school completely. He packed his meager belongings into a battered 1969 Volvo, and he drove away from the freezing winters of Toronto. He drove toward the flashing, intoxicating lights of Los Angeles. He was a high school dropout. He was a dyslexic, quiet boy carrying the heavy, bleeding wound of total abandonment. He was driving into the most ruthless, cynical, and superficial industry on the planet, hoping to find a place where he finally belonged. But as the 1980s began to unfold, The boy who had spent his life guarding the net was entirely unprepared for the staggering, magnificent, and ultimately devastating hand the universe was preparing to deal him. Hollywood was about to give him everything he ever dreamed of, only to violently, brutally snatch it away, starting with the most beautiful, shining soul he would ever have the privilege of calling a friend. The kindred spirit, the cold sidewalk, and the first devastation. There's a manufactured, highly cynical illusion about friendship in the city of Los Angeles. In an industry powered by vanity, box office receipts, and relentless competition, relationships are frequently transactional. Two young, beautiful actors are paired together for a magazine cover. They smile for the cameras, and they pretend to be brothers. But behind the flashbulbs, they are quietly, desperately fighting for the exact same roles. To find a genuine, uncorrupted, and deeply authentic soul connection in Hollywood is a statistical impossibility. It is like trying to find a quiet, burning candle in the middle of a hurricane. But as the 1980s bled into the 1990s, Keanu Reeves, the dyslexic, fatherless boy from Toronto, found exactly that. He found a mirror for his own restless soul. His name was River Phoenix. To understand the profound, absolutely staggering emotional gravity of River Phoenix, you must understand that he was not just another young actor. He was an incandescent, once-in-a-generation phenomenon. He possessed a raw, terrifyingly vulnerable brilliance that drew immediate comparisons to James Dean and Marlon Brando. By the time he was 18, he had already secured an Academy Award nomination. But beneath the golden, untouchable surface of River's fame, there was a deeply unconventional, traumatic, and nomadic childhood. He, too, knew what it meant to be a boy without a permanent home. He knew the heavy, suffocating weight of being a breadwinner for a fractured family before he was even a teenager. When Keanu and River met on the set of the comedy I Love You to Death in 1989, the recognition was instantaneous. They did not see each other as rivals. They looked at each other and recognized the exact same invisible, bleeding scars. They became utterly, profoundly inseparable. They rode motorcycle for hours through the winding, dusty canyons of California, the roaring engine providing a temporary escape from the deafening noise of their own fame. They played music together. They sat in quiet hotel rooms, discussing philosophy, existence, and the terrifying, beautiful absurdity of the lives they had somehow stumbled into. For Keanu, a young man who had spent his entire life building a psychological wall to protect himself from the abandonment of his father, River was the ultimate sanctuary. River was the very first person in the industry who made Keanu feel like he belonged to something permanent. In 1991, their magnificent brotherhood was immortalized on celluloid in Gus Van Sant's groundbreaking, deeply poetic independent film, My Own Private Idaho. When Keanu read the script, he knew the film would only work if River agreed to play opposite him. River's agent had refused to show him the script, deeming the gritty, highly controversial subject matter too risky for his golden boy image. But Keanu did not care about the Hollywood rules. In a legendary act of pure, uncompromising devotion, Keanu got on his 1974 Norton Commando motorcycle and drove over 1,000 miles from Canada all the way to Florida, simply to hand-deliver the script directly into River's hands. The film they created together was an absolute masterpiece of sorrow and longing. Watching the two of them on screen, sitting beside a crackling campfire in the freezing desert of the Pacific Northwest, you are not watching two actors performing a scene. You are watching two incredibly sensitive, bruised young men holding on to each other for dear life. Looking back at the profound, fiercely protective love he held for his friend, Keanu would later offer a quote that perfectly captures the brilliant, overwhelming light of River Phoenix. He was a remarkably beautiful person, a beautiful soul, Keanu said softly, his voice thick with a reverence that decades could not erase. He was so creative, original, and brilliant. We shared an artistic sensibility. He was a brother to me. He was a brother to me. For the older audiences watching this, for the men and women who have been incredibly lucky enough to find that one singular friend in life who completely understand the language of their heart, Without needing translation, that declaration is overwhelmingly powerful. Keanu had finally found his family. The boy who was abandoned in the dark had finally found a companion to walk with him in the light. But the universe operated with its incredibly cruel, mathematically precise sense of tragedy, was about to demand an unbearable toll. The light that burns twice as bright burns half as long. River was a supernova, carrying the immense, crushing expectations of the entire entertainment industry on his young shoulders. And to cope with the suffocating pressure of being a global idol, River had quietly, desperately sought refuge in the shadows. He was fighting a private, agonizing battle against the demons of his own pain, demons that the public could not see, and demons that the Hollywood machine entirely ignored as long as he kept making them money. The timeline of Keanu Reeves' life was about to be violently, permanently fractured. On the night of October 31st, 1993, on the crowded, neon-lit sidewalks of the Sunset Strip in West Hollywood, the unthinkable occurred. Outside a nightclub called the Viper Room, the relentless, artificial pressures of fame and quiet, internal storms that River had fought so privately finally demanded their agonizing, irreversible price. A catastrophic, chemical storm overtook his fragile, exhausted heart. He collapsed onto the cold, unforgiving concrete of the sidewalk. His younger brother, Joaquin, frantically made a desperate, terrifying 911 call that would later be broadcast across the globe, pleading for the paramedics to save his brother's life. But the damage was too absolute. The universe had made its terrifying decision. River Phoenix slipped across the threshold. He was dead at the age of 23. When the news reached Keanu, he was on a movie set, filming the action blockbuster Speed. Imagine the sheer, unadulterated, psychological apocalypse of that exact moment. You are 29 years old. You are standing under the bright artificial lights of a Hollywood soundstage, pretending to defuse a bomb, pretending to be a hero who can save the day. And a producer walks up to you and tells you that the brightest, most beautiful soul you have ever known has just died on a dirty sidewalk in Los Angeles. The cruelty of the timing was staggering. In 1994, Speed exploded into theaters worldwide. The film grossed over $350 million. It completely revolutionized the modern action genre and instantly, permanently cemented Keanu Reeves as one of the biggest, most bankable movie stars on the entire planet. He was thrust into the blinding, chaotic epicenter of global superstardom. His face was on every magazine cover. The world was screaming his name. But the man sitting inside the limousine was completely, utterly hollowed out. This is the ultimate, heartbreaking paradox of Keanu Reeves' ascent to godhood. He had achieved everything a young actor could possibly dream of, but the one person he wanted to share it with was buried in the earth. The universe had handed him the keys to the kingdom, but it had entirely burned down his sanctuary. When the world looked at him in the mid-1990s, they saw a wealthy, handsome, untouchable action hero. But behind the dark sunglasses, the legendary sad Keanu archetype had quietly, permanently been born. "I hate it," Keanu once murmured, his voice trembling with a quiet, bottomless grief when asked about the loss of his friend. "I hate that he's not here. I miss him every day." The death of River Phoenix taught Keanu the most devastating, terrifying lesson of his entire existence. It proved to him, with absolute certainty, that Hollywood fame is an incredibly fragile, meaningless illusion. Millions of dollars in the bank cannot buy you an extra second of time with the people you love. Being a global icon cannot stop a heart from failing on a cold sidewalk. The tragedy completely stripped away any remaining trace of vanity or ego in Keanu's soul. He became intensely private. He stopped caring about the superficial trappings of celebrity. He realized that the ground beneath his feet was just as unstable as it had been when his father abandoned him in Beirut 30 years prior. Keanu Reeves believed that he had paid his ultimate, agonizing debt to the universe. He believed that the loss of his brother in arms was the absolute lowest point a human heart could endure. But he was entirely, tragically mistaken. As the 1990s drew to a close, Keanu was preparing to step into a long, black trench coat and become the definitive cinematic savior of the 21st century. The world was about to crown him as the ultimate, invincible chosen one. And as he finally dared to open his heavily scarred heart to a woman, preparing to build a family he had always dreamed of, the universe was quietly sharpening a blade in the dark. The ultimate tragedy was not behind him. It was waiting for him just across the threshold of the new millennium, and it was going to demand a sacrifice so complete, so absolutely annihilating, that it would bring the savior of the world entirely to his knees. The savior of the screen, the empty nursery, and the ultimate annihilation. There's a cruel, almost incomprehensible mathematical formula that governs the universe of Keanu Reeves. It seems that for every monumental, history-altering triumph he achieves on the silver screen, the universe demands an equally monumental, soul-crushing sacrifice in his personal life. It is an exchange rate of absolute, terrifying brutality. By the late 1990s, Keanu had quietly endured the devastating loss of his best friend, River Phoenix. He had retreated into his work, burying his grief beneath the relentless discipline of acting. And as the calendar turned toward the dawn of the new millennium, the universe prepared to hand him a role that would permanently elevate him from a movie star to a global mythological icon. In 1999, a revolutionary, mind-bending cinematic masterpiece was released upon the world. The film was The Matrix. Keanu Reeves was cast as Thomas Anderson, a man who awakens from a simulated reality to become Neo, the ultimate prophesied savior of humanity. The role required months of grueling, agonizing physical martial arts training, pushing his body to the absolute brink of exhaustion. But the result was a cultural earthquake. When audiences watched Keanu Reeves wearing that long, black trench coat, moving with a digital, superhuman grace, dodging bullets in slow motion, they did not just see an action hero. They saw a god. He was the chosen one. He was a man who could bend the very fabric of reality to his will. He could stop time. He could cheat death. The Matrix grossed hundreds of millions of dollars and fundamentally rewired the global consciousness. Keanu Reeves was arguably the most famous, most worshipped man on the entire planet. And in a beautiful, incredibly rare moment of cosmic mercy, his personal life finally seemed to reflect the glittering perfection of his professional success. In 1998, Keanu met a bright, deeply soulful and grounded woman named Jennifer Syme. Jennifer was not a Hollywood superstar desperately chasing the spotlight. She was an assistant to director David Lynch, a woman who understood the chaotic machinery of the industry, but preferred to exist quietly, authentically, and intelligently outside of its destructive glare. When Keanu looked at Jennifer, the heavy, invisible armor he had worn since the abandonment of his father in Beirut, and since the cold night River died on the sidewalk, finally began to melt. They fell passionately, fiercely in love. For the first time in his 34 years of existence, the nomadic, restless boy from Toronto finally felt like he was putting down roots. And the ultimate, magnificent culmination of their love arrived when Jennifer discovered she was pregnant. They were expecting a baby girl. They had even picked out a name, Ava Archer Syme Reeves. Stop and consider profound, breathtaking weight of this specific moment for Keanu Reeves. This is a man whose own father had packed his bags and abandoned him when he was just 3 years old. The psychological void of that desertion had haunted his entire life. And now, he was being given the ultimate opportunity for redemption. He was going to become a father. He was going to be the man who stayed. He was going to build the warm, permanent, unbroken family that he had been entirely denied as a child. He was buying a house. He was preparing the nursery. He was standing on the absolute summit of human happiness. But destiny, operating with a cold, terrifying, and utterly indifferent cruelty, was preparing to rewrite the script. In December 1999, just days before the world was preparing to celebrate Christmas and ring in the new millennium, a dark, suffocating silence fell over Keanu and Jennifer's lives. Jennifer was 8 months pregnant. The baby had stopped moving. They rushed to the hospital, praying for a miracle, praying that the doctors were wrong. But there was no miracle to be found in that sterile, brightly lit room. On Christmas Eve, a time universally associated with the miraculous birth of a child, Jennifer was forced to deliver their baby girl. Ava was stillborn. To describe the sheer, unadulterated psychological apocalypse of holding a lifeless infant in your arms is impossible. It is a sorrow that has no language. For a parent, it is a violation of the very order of the universe. The nursery they had so carefully prepared was suddenly transformed into a museum of unimaginable grief. The toys would never be played with. The clothes would never be worn. The profound, agonizing weight of that tragedy completely fractured their relationship. Grief is an incredibly isolating, suffocating burden, and the loss of a child often creates a chasm too wide for romance to survive. Within weeks, unable to bear the heavy, silent reflection of their shared agony, Keanu and Jennifer separated. But the love between them did not disappear. It merely mutated into a deep, tragic, and fiercely protective friendship. They remained inextricably tied together by a sorrow that absolutely no one else on earth could possibly comprehend. Keanu buried himself in his work. He signed on to film the grueling, back-to-back sequels of The Matrix. He put the black coat back on. He stepped back in front of the green screens to pretend to be a superhero. But the universe was not finished demanding its toll. The final, absolute annihilation of his heart was quietly waiting in the dark. On the night of April 1st, 2001, just 18 agonizing months after they had buried their baby girl, Jennifer Syme was driving her Jeep Cherokee alone on the dark, winding stretch of Cahuenga Boulevard in Los Angeles. In a sudden, violent intersection of metal and fate, she lost control of the vehicle. The crash was catastrophic. Jennifer was thrown from the car. She died instantly on the cold asphalt of the city. She was 28 years old. When the devastating phone call reached Keanu Reeves, the very foundation of his reality completely, permanently collapsed. Imagine the staggering, sickening literary irony of his existence in that exact moment. By day, he was on a multi-million-dollar movie set, playing a god who could raise his hand and stop 1,000 bullets in midair. He was playing a savior who could bend the rules of the universe to protect the people he loved. But by night, he was just a broken, powerless, 36-year-old man, standing in a morgue, identifying the shattered body of the only woman he had ever wanted to marry, who was now going to be buried right next to the tiny grave of their infant daughter. He was the cinematic savior of the world, but he was completely, tragically incapable of saving his own family. Keanu served as a pallbearer at her funeral. He carried the heavy wooden casket, his face hidden behind dark sunglasses, absorbing a level of psychological devastation that would have driven most men to absolute, irreversible madness. Years later, in a rare, profoundly agonizing interview, Keanu was asked how he managed to survive the suffocating weight of so much concentrated loss. He did not offer a Hollywood cliché about moving on. He did not pretend that time heals all wounds. Instead, he offered a quote of such startling, poetic truth that it remains a masterclass in the human understanding of sorrow. "Grief changes shape, but it never ends," he said quietly, his voice a low, heavy whisper. "People have a misconception that you can deal with it and say, 'It's gone and I'm better.' They're wrong. When the people you love are gone, you're alone. I miss being a part of their lives, and them being part of mine. I wonder what the present would be like if they were here, what we might have done together. I miss all the great things that will never be. Grief changes shape, but it never ends." For the older audiences watching this, for the mothers who have lost children, for the husbands who have buried their wives, for the millions of people walking around with a smile on their face while carrying a graveyard in their chest, that sentence is the absolute, undisputed gospel of human survival. Keanu Reeves understood that you do not get over the death of your entire future. You simply learn how to carry the ghost. In the aftermath of 2001, the man who was worth hundreds of millions of dollars found himself entirely alone in the world. The father who had abandoned him, the best friend who had died on the sidewalk, the daughter who never took a breath, and the love of his life who died in a crash. They were all gone. The Hollywood machine expected him to buy a massive mansion in Beverly Hills, to surround himself with supermodels, to numb the pain with luxury, yachts, and intoxicating illusions of endless wealth. But Keanu Reeves was about to make a decision that would completely baffle the entertainment industry and permanently cement his legacy as the most enigmatic, saint-like figure in the history of fame. He looked at his massive fortune, he looked at the empty rooms of his life, and he decided that he was going to give it all away. He was about to reject the very concept of wealth, transforming himself into a quiet, generous ghost riding the public subway, embarking on a remarkable journey of solitary philanthropy that would prove, once and for all, the magnificent, unbreakable gentleness of his broken heart. The ghost on the subway, the empty mansion, and a rejection of wealth. There's a deeply ingrained, almost religious belief in the modern world that extreme wealth is the ultimate shield against human suffering. We are conditioned to believe that if a man can just accumulate enough millions, he can buy a fortress thick enough to keep the tragedies of life from breaching his front door. But when the Reaper comes to collect the people you love, he does not care about the size of your bank account. He does not ask for your box office receipts. In the agonizing, silent aftermath of 2001, Keanu Reeves was a man who possessed everything the world told him he was supposed to want. Following the astronomical global phenomenon of the Matrix, his personal net worth was soaring toward hundreds of millions of dollars. He was the undisputed, most highly compensated cinematic savior on the planet. But look incredibly closely at the terrifying, suffocating paradox of his reality. He had amassed a mountain of gold, specifically to build a kingdom for the family he had always dreamed of. He had the money to buy the perfect nursery. He had the wealth to provide his wife with the most beautiful life imaginable. But the nursery was empty, and the woman he loved was gone. For a man carrying that specific, crushing weight of grief, immense wealth is not a blessing. It is a cruel, mocking reminder of the things money cannot buy. You cannot bribe the universe to give you back a single breath of your stillborn daughter. You cannot write a check large enough to reverse a catastrophic car crash. And so, Keanu Reeves made a decision that completely, fundamentally baffled the cynical, greed-driven machinery of Hollywood. He looked at his massive fortune, and he simply stopped caring about it. He became a ghost. While other actors of his stature were engaging in massive, ego-driven real estate wars, buying sprawling 20-bedroom mansions in Beverly Hills, purchasing private islands, and surrounding themselves with fleets of luxury sports cars, Keanu refused to buy a house. For over a decade, the biggest movie star in the world essentially lived out of a single suitcase. He resided in hotels, most notably the Chateau Marmont in Los Angeles, moving quietly from room to room. Think about the profound, heartbreaking psychology behind that choice. Why would a billionaire refuse to buy a home? Because a massive, echoing mansion requires a family to fill it. To buy a sprawling estate would mean walking down empty, silent hallways every single night, listening for the laughter of a child who never arrived, and waiting for the footsteps of a woman who was never coming home. By living in a hotel, Keanu ensured that everything around him was temporary. He embraced the life of a nomad, completely detaching himself from the heavy, painful illusions of permanence. But his rejection of wealth went far beyond real estate. It manifested an act of staggering, almost incomprehensible generosity that completely broke the unwritten rules of Hollywood capitalism. In 2003, as production wrapped on the immensely grueling back-to-back shoots of The Matrix Reloaded and The Matrix Revolutions, Keanu was contractually entitled to a massive portion of the film's back-end profits. Estimates suggested his total payday would easily exceed $100 million. But Keanu looked at the exhausting, invisible labor of the blue-collar workers on the set, the special effects teams, the computer programmers, the makeup artists, and the costume designers who actually built the magical world he inhabited. He quietly marched into the studio executives' offices and did the unthinkable. He surrendered the vast majority of his back-end points, redirecting an estimated $75 million of his own personal fortune directly into the paychecks of the special effects and makeup crews. When he discovered the 12 incredibly brave stuntmen who had taken physical beatings to make him look like an invincible martial arts god, he didn't just write them a polite thank you note. He bought every single one of them a brand new, incredibly expensive Harley-Davidson motorcycle. When asked by baffled reporters why he would willingly give away the kind of money that emperors go to war over, Keanu delivered a quote of such startling, enlightened purity that it permanently elevated him from a movie star to a modern-day saint. "Money is the last thing I think about," he said quietly, his voice completely devoid of arrogance. "I could live on what I've already made for the next few centuries. Money doesn't mean anything to me. I've made a lot of money, but I want to enjoy life and not stress myself building my bank account. Good health is much more important. Money doesn't mean anything to me." For the older audiences watching this, those who have spent decades grinding, saving, and stressing over mortgages, only to realize in the autumn of their lives that health, peace, and the presence of loved ones are the only true currencies that matter. Keanu's philosophy is an absolute revelation. He was performing a kind of spiritual alchemy. Since his money could not buy joy for himself, he decided to use it to buy joy for the hard-working, invisible people around him. He was trying to heal his own broken heart by ensuring that others did not have to suffer. As the 2000s transitioned into the 2010s, Keanu Reeves became something entirely unique in the history of fame. He became completely, wonderfully ordinary. In May of 2010, a paparazzi photographer captured an image that would instantly explode across the globe, becoming one of the most famous, defining visual moments of the decade. It was not a photo of Keanu on a red carpet. It was not a photo of him driving a sports car. It was a photograph of a 45-year-old Keanu Reeves, sitting completely alone on a park bench in New York City. He was wearing worn-out jeans and scuffed boots. He had a slightly overgrown beard. He was staring blankly at the ground, quietly eating a sandwich by himself, occasionally feeding the crumbs to a pigeon near his feet. The internet, which relies on rapid-fire mockery, immediately turned the photo into a viral phenomenon known as Sad Keanu. They turned his solitary lunch into a global meme. But the older generation, the people who actually understand the heavy, silent weight of human existence, did not laugh at that photo. They looked at that image and they saw a profound, majestic dignity. They saw a man who had survived the absolute worst fires the universe could conjure, sitting peacefully on a piece of public wood, enjoying a cheap sandwich in the sun. He wasn't hiding behind an entourage of bodyguards. He wasn't seeking pity. He was simply existing, completely unbothered by his own massive celebrity. He proved that true wealth is not the ability to buy a private island. True wealth is the absolute freedom to sit on a park bench and not care what the world thinks of you. A year later, in 2011, another piece of shaky, amateur footage surfaced on the internet. A fellow passenger secretly recorded Keanu riding the crowded, public subway in New York City. Think about the sheer, mind-bending absurdity of that sentence. The savior of the cinematic universe, a man worth hundreds of millions, was holding onto a metal pole on a grimy, rattling subway train, commuting just like everyone else. And when a woman carrying a heavy bag boarded the train, the camera captured Keanu silently, effortlessly standing up and offering her a seat, without expecting a single camera flash or a round of applause. He was not acting. He was not managing a PR crisis. He was just being a gentleman in the dark. For over a decade, Keanu Reeves walked among us as a quiet, benevolent ghost. He had completely rejected the toxicity of Hollywood, choosing instead to wander the earth, sharing his wealth, and carrying the heavy ghost of his lost family with absolute, unwavering grace. He seemed perfectly content to let his career fade into the quiet background of history. But the universe, which had taken so much of him, was quietly preparing to hand him a script that would demand he channel every single ounce of his repressed, agonizing grief. The long, silent winter was about to end. The man who had spent 15 years bearing his sadness was about to be asked to pick up a weapon, step back into the blinding spotlight, and unleash the most spectacular, terrifying, and deeply poetic cinematic vengeance of the entire 21st century. The assassin's grief, the puppy, and the alchemy of pain. There's a profound, terrifying misconception about the nature of time and grief. We are constantly told that time heals all wounds. We are told that as the years pass, the sharp, agonizing edges of loss will naturally dull, fading into a quiet, manageable ache. But for a man who has lost his entire future, time does not heal the wound. It simply forces him to build a thicker layer of scar tissue around it. By 2014, Keanu Reeves was approaching his 50th birthday. Nearly 15 years had passed since he stood in that cold cemetery, burying his stillborn daughter, Ava, and the absolute love of his life, Jennifer Syme. For a decade and a half, he had wandered through the Hollywood landscape like an incredibly polite, highly functional ghost. He had given away his fortune. He had ridden the subway in silence. He had deliberately stepped out of the blinding, superficial spotlight of the A-list, accepting roles in smaller, obscure independent films that largely flew under the radar of the mainstream public. The industry, obsessed with the shiny perfection of youth, assumed the golden era of Keanu Reeves was permanently finished. They thought the sad Keanu sitting on the park bench was a final, melancholic chapter of his legacy. But the universe, which had systematically broken his heart, was quietly preparing to hand him a vessel, a script that would allow him to finally, violently exhale the immense, suffocating grief he had been holding in his lungs for 15 years. The script was brought to him by two former stuntmen, Chad Stahelski and David Leitch, who had actually taken physical beatings as Keanu's stunt doubles on the set of The Matrix. It was a low-budget, highly stylized action thriller about a retired hitman named John Wick. On the surface, the premise of the film sounded dangerously simple, perhaps even absurd to a cynical studio executive. It was about a man whose beloved wife passes away from a terminal illness. From her deathbed, knowing that her husband will be completely consumed by the dark, freezing isolation of his grief, she arranges for a final gift to be delivered to him after her passing, a beagle puppy. She leaves him a note, telling him that he needs something to love in order to remember his own humanity. When a group of arrogant, reckless criminals break into the man's home, steal his car, and cruelly kill the puppy, the retired hitman methodically unearths his buried weapons and unleashes an apocalyptic, unstoppable storm of vengeance upon the entire criminal underworld. For a lesser actor, this is just another popcorn action movie. But when 50-year-old Keanu Reeves read that script, he did not see an action movie. He saw a mirror. He saw a man who had miraculously found a beautiful, quiet sanctuary of love, only to have a universe violently rip it away. He understood the profound, psychological significance of that puppy. The dog was not just an animal. It was the absolute last, breathing connection to his dead wife. It was the only remaining vessel for his unexpressed love. When the criminals killed the dog, they were not just committing a crime. They were killing his wife a second time. They were extinguishing the final flicker of light in his dark, empty house. Keanu understood that absolute, bottomless void. He had lived in it since 2001. He signed on to do the film, but he did not approach it like a Hollywood star looking for a paycheck. He approached it like a man stepping into a spiritual crucible. To prepare for the demanding, balletic, and utterly exhausting choreography of John Wick, Keanu subjected his aging, 50-year-old body to months of brutal, punishing physical conditioning. He trained in judo, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, and tactical weapon handling for 8 hours a day, pushing his muscles and his joints to the absolute edge of failure. For the older audiences watching this, for the men and women who have ever gone outside and chopped wood until their hands bled, or scrubbed a kitchen floor until their knees ached, just to silence the agonizing, screaming thoughts in their own heads. The psychology behind Keanu's training is profoundly recognizable. He was not just building stamina for the camera. He was using the physical exhaustion to purge his emotional agony. He was sweating out the 15 years of silent, suffocating grief. When John Wick exploded into theaters in October 2014, it did not just succeed. It completely, violently redefined the entire landscape of modern action cinema. It was a massive, unexpected global phenomenon. But why did audiences connect so deeply, so fiercely with this character? It wasn't just because the action sequences were masterfully choreographed. It was because the audience was watching something incredibly rare, raw, and undeniably authentic on a silver screen. When Keanu Reeves, as John Wick, collapses on the floor, clutching his bleeding, lifeless puppy, weeping with agonizing, guttural despair, that is not acting. That is a man who knows exactly what it feels like to stand in a morgue. When he puts on the tailored black suit, his eyes completely hollowed out and devoid of all fear, staring down an army of heavily armed men, the audience is feeling the terrifying, unstoppable gravity of a man who has absolutely nothing left to lose. He took his own intensely private tragedy, and he performed an absolute miracle of artistic alchemy. He weaponized his heartbreak. He turned his real-life tears into cinematic bullets. Speaking about the profound, deeply philosophical, emotional core of the character, Keanu later delivered a quote that strips away the violence of the film and exposes the beautiful, bleeding heart beneath it. For me, John's grief is what makes it personal, Keanu explained softly, his voice echoing with the quiet wisdom of a man who has survived the fire. It's what connects him to the audience. The grief and the love are conjoined. You can't have one without the other. John is fighting for the memory of his love. He is fighting for his right to grieve. The grief and the love are conjoined. Listen to the breathtaking, majestic truth of that statement. Keanu Reeves taught the world that grief is not a weakness. Grief is simply love that has nowhere to go. Grief is the agonizing, beautiful receipt we are handed for having had profound privilege of loving someone entirely. The success of John Wick catapulted Keanu Reeves back to the absolute, undisputed summit of Hollywood. The film spawned a multi-billion-dollar franchise. Suddenly, the 50-year-old man who had been riding the subway in silence was, once again, the most beloved, universally respected leading man on the planet. The internet dubbed him the internet's boyfriend. Stories of his quiet, anonymous acts of kindness, buying food for stranded passengers, giving a seat away on the train, quietly funding children's hospitals, began to flood social media, cementing his status as the absolute saint of the entertainment industry. He had reclaimed his throne, but this time, he was not the boyish, flawless savior of the Matrix. He was a weathered, deeply scarred, and profoundly wise patriarch of his own survival. Yet, when the spectacular premieres ended, when the deafening roar of the global crowds faded away, Keanu still had to go back to his hotel room. He still had to unlock the door to a quiet, empty space. He was the most beloved man on the planet, but he was still walking to the world entirely alone. He had spent nearly 2 decades protecting his heart, building a massive, impenetrable fortress of solitude to ensure the universe could never, ever hurt him again. He had accepted his fate as the solitary ghost of Hollywood, but as he navigated through his mid-50s, the thick, heavy ice that had encased his soul since 2001 was slowly, quietly beginning to thaw. The man who had faced down an army of assassins on screen was about to face a completely different and infinitely more terrifying kind of challenge in reality. The universe, having witnessed his magnificent endurance, was finally preparing to offer him a reprieve. It was preparing to hand him the one thing he had been absolutely terrified to touch for 20 years. The long, freezing winter was finally coming to an end, and Keanu Reeves was about to summon the unimaginable, breathtaking courage to do the hardest thing a broken man can possibly do. He was going to open his hands and allow himself to be loved again. The thawing ice, the silver-haired muse, and the courage to love again. There's profound, incredibly dangerous comfort in profound grief. When a human being loses the absolute center of their universe, when they are forced to stand in a cemetery and bury the future they have meticulously planned, they inherently build a fortress around their heart. The logic of the traumatized mind is chillingly simple. If I never love anyone that deeply ever again, the universe can never, ever hurt me that badly again. For nearly 2 decades, Keanu Reeves lived entirely inside that freezing, impenetrable fortress. following the catastrophic, devastating losses of his daughter and his beloved Jennifer in 1999 and 2001. The most famous movie star on the planet effectively became a monk. He was exceptionally kind to strangers. He was boundlessly generous to his colleagues. And he smiled warmly from millions of photographs. But he was operating from a very safe, heavily guarded distance. He kept his soul completely quarantined. He accepted his destiny as the solitary, wandering ghost of Hollywood. But the human heart, no matter how thickly it is encased in ice, is fundamentally designed to seek warmth. In 2009, at a quiet, unassuming dinner party, Keanu crossed paths with a woman who operated on an entirely different frequency than the Hollywood machinery. Her name was Alexandra Grant. Alexandra was not an actress desperately chasing a blockbuster audition. She was not a 22-year-old model looking for a famous benefactor. She was a fiercely intelligent, highly respected visual artist and linguistic scholar. She was a woman who explored the complex relationships between text, language, and visual imagery. She possessed a deep, quiet gravity. Initially, their connection was purely, strictly artistic. Keanu had written a melancholic, self-deprecating poem, and a mutual friend suggested that Alexandra create the illustrations for it. In 2011, they published the result of the collaboration, a deeply moving, beautifully illustrated adult picture book titled Ode to Happiness. They followed it up in 2016 with a second, darker, and more introspective collaboration titled Shadows. During those quiet, focused years of artistic partnership, something incredibly profound began to happen inside the dark, echoing rooms of Keanu's heart. When you spend your entire life being worshipped for your physical face, being surrounded by agents, directors, and fans who only want a piece of your fame, you develop an extreme sensitivity to authenticity. Keanu looked at Alexandra and realized that she did not care about the Matrix or John Wick. She did not care about his bank account. She saw the deeply sensitive, widely read, and emotionally bruised man underneath the black trench coat. She met him exactly where he was, completely without judgment. They transitioned from artistic collaborators to close friends, and slowly, beautifully, the friendship blossomed into a profound, undeniable romance. But it wasn't until November 2019, at the LACMA Art Plus Film Gala in Los Angeles, that the intensely private actor made a decision that completely shattered the internet and fundamentally altered his public legacy. Keanu Reeves walked onto the red carpet, firmly and proudly holding the hand of Alexandra Grant. The media and the global public absolutely lost their collective minds. But the shock was not simply because the notoriously secretive, sad Keanu finally had a girlfriend. The shock and the subsequent, overwhelming wave of global admiration was deeply rooted in who Alexandra actually was. In an industry governed by a toxic, deeply misogynistic mathematical formula, where aging leading men in their 50s and 60s routinely discard their partners to date women who are 30 or 40 years younger than them, Keanu Reeves did something radically, breathtakingly countercultural. He proudly held the hand of a woman who was completely, wonderfully age-appropriate. Alexandra Grant, then 46 years old, did not dye her hair to hide her age. She wore her magnificent, natural silver hair with absolute, unapologetic royalty. She did not have a face frozen by artificial, surgical preservation. She possessed a natural, radiant, and deeply lined beauty of a woman who has actually lived, read, laughed, and created art. For the millions of women and men watching around the world, especially the older generation who constantly feel erased and devalued by a youth-obsessed culture, this red carpet moment was an absolute revelation. Keanu Reeves, a man who could theoretically date any supermodel on the planet, looked at a brilliant, silver-haired artist and said to the world, "This is my queen." It was the ultimate, undisputed proof of his incredible character. It proved that he was a man who valued the depth of a soul far more than the superficial, fleeting illusion of a plastic exterior. But to fully comprehend the sheer, staggering magnitude of this romance, we must look past the red carpet and delve directly into the psychological battlefield of Keanu's mind. To fall in love is always a risk. But to fall in love after you have stood in a morgue and identified the body of the woman you intended to marry, to open your heart again after you have buried your own child, that is not a fairy tale. That is an act of absolute, breathtaking heroism. It takes an unimaginable level of bravery to look at another human being, knowing with terrifying, absolute certainty how fragile life is, knowing exactly how much a coffin weighs, and deciding to say, I will love you anyway. Keanu Reeves proved that the ultimate superhero move is not dodging a bullet. It is allowing someone to gently dismantle your armor, even when you know it leaves you completely vulnerable to the fatal arrows of the universe. The ice had finally, permanently thawed. The long, silent winter that had gripped his soul since 2001 was officially over. And if you want to know exactly what this hard-won, late-in-life salvation looks like, you only need to listen to Keanu's own words. In March of 2023, during an incredibly rare, intimate interview with People magazine, the 58-year-old superstar was asked a very simple question. When was your last moment of bliss? He did not mention the roar of a crowd. He did not mention the premiere of a billion-dollar blockbuster. He did not mention riding a motorcycle at 100 miles an hour. Keanu paused, smiled a soft, incredibly genuine smile, and delivered a quote that is so deeply, piercingly beautiful that it should be framed in every home on earth. A couple of days ago with my honey, he said, his voice dropping into a quiet, reverent whisper. We were in bed. We were connected. We were smiling and laughing and giggling, feeling great. It was just really nice to be together. It was just really nice to be together. Listen to the absolute, majestic simplicity of that statement. For a man who had spent the last 2 decades wandering the earth like a polite, grieving ghost, the simple, mundane act of lying in bed with a woman he loves, laughing and feeling connected, was the absolute pinnacle of human existence. It was his ultimate heaven. He had survived the desert of his own despair. He had finally found his oasis. As the calendar pushed past his late 50s and into the defining era of his early 60s, Keanu Reeves found himself standing on a completely different kind of summit. He was no longer just a box office king, and he was no longer the tragic, lonely figure eating a sandwich on a park bench. He had successfully integrated the massive, gaping wounds of his past with quiet, profound joy of his present. But as the modern world hurtles forward into the year 2026, completely consumed by anger, division, and a relentless, cynical negativity, the 61-year-old actor remains an impossible, almost mystical anomaly. He is a man who was handed every single justification to become bitter, cruel, and selfish, yet he actively chose to become the exact opposite. The final, magnificent question of Keanu Reeves' legacy is not about the movies he made or the stunts he performed. It is a profound, spiritual question about the choices we all make when the universe breaks our hearts. The savior of Hollywood is preparing to deliver his ultimate, most enduring lesson to humanity, and it has absolutely nothing to do with fighting villains. It has everything to do with the radical, unbreakable power of choosing to remain gentle. The saint of Hollywood, the answer to death, and the ultimate grace. There's a widely accepted, deeply cynical psychological theory about human trauma. We are taught that pain inherently hardens a person. We are told that when a man is repeatedly struck by the merciless, freezing winds of tragedy, his heart will naturally calcify into stone. It is a fundamental origin story of almost every villain in the history of storytelling. The world broke them, so they decided to break the world in return. But Keanu Reeves fundamentally, spectacularly destroyed that theory. If anyone on the face of the earth had the absolute, undeniable justification to become bitter, angry, and ruthlessly selfish, it was the boy from Toronto. His father abandoned him. The unforgiving concrete of Hollywood claimed his brilliant best friend. A sterile hospital room took his infant daughter. And a violent, catastrophic car crash took the absolute love of his life. The universe systematically stripped his hands of everything he ever desperately tried to hold on to. The world gave him every single reason to turn his heart into a fortress of razor wire and ice. But Keanu Reeves looked at the darkness. He looked at the profound, agonizing unfairness of his own existence, and he made the most radical, rebellious, and breathtakingly courageous decision a human being can possibly make. He decided to stay soft. He weaponized his grief and transformed it into an overwhelming, boundless ocean of empathy. Because he knew exactly how agonizing it felt to be broken, he made a silent, lifelong vow to ensure that he would never, ever be the cause of someone else's pain. He became the ultimate, undisputed saint of Hollywood. He secretly funded children's hospitals for decades, expressly forbidding the administrators from putting his name on the buildings, because true charity does not require a billboard. He treated the minimum wage crew members on his movie sets with the exact same profound, unwavering respect that he offered to billionaire studio executives. He gave up his subway seat to strangers. He sat on the pavement and shared his lunch with the homeless. He moved through the glittering, toxic, and superficial machinery of the entertainment industry like an untouchable, benevolent ghost. But to truly comprehend the staggering, majestic depth of his soul, we must look at a seemingly ordinary television interview that occurred in May of 2019. Keanu was a guest on The Late Show with Stephen Colbert. The conversation was lighthearted, promoting his latest action film. But as the interview drew to a close, Colbert, known for his own deep intellect and Catholic faith, suddenly leaned forward and asked Keanu an incredibly profound, unscripted, and impossibly heavy theological question. "What do you think happens when we die, Keanu?" Colbert asked. "It is the ultimate question of human existence. It is a question that philosophers, priests, and scientists have spent millennia attempting to answer. Usually, when a celebrity is asked a question of this magnitude, they offer a polite cliché, a joke, or a vague, rehearsed spiritual platitude. Keanu Reeves did not make a joke. He took a deep, heavy breath. He looked down for a fraction of a second, his eyes flashing with the accumulated weight of the morgues, the funerals, and the empty rooms he had survived. And then he delivered an answer so incredibly profound, so piercingly beautiful, that it completely stunned the audience into absolute silence. "I know that the ones who love us," Keanu said quietly, his voice a gentle, unwavering whisper, "will miss us. I know that the ones who love us will miss us." Listen to the absolute, staggering majesty of those 10 words. He did not claim to know the secrets of heaven. He did not offer a complicated religious doctrine. He bypassed the ego, the theology, and the fear of the unknown entirely, and he anchored the ultimate mystery of death directly to the only thing that actually matters: love. For the older audiences watching this, for the men and women who have stood beside a hospital bed, holding the fading hand of a spouse or a parent, terrified of the impending silence, that sentence is the absolute, undisputed gospel of human comfort. Keanu reminded the world that the pain of grief is simply the receipt we are handed for the privilege of being loved. He proved that he was not just an actor reading a script. He was a master who had survived the fire and returned with the ultimate truth. Today, in the year 2026, Keanu Reeves is 61 years old. To look at him now is to witness a man who has achieved an exquisite, hard-won peace. The raven black hair of the 1990s is heavily threaded with gray. The iconic, ageless face carries the beautiful, dignified mileage of a man who has traveled through hell and walked out the other side. He is still working, still riding his beloved arch motorcycles through the winding canyons of California, and still delivering incredibly disciplined, physically astonishing performances on screen. But the frantic, desperate search for meaning that defined his youth has completely evaporated. He is anchored by the profound, steady, and incredibly intelligent love of his partner, Alexandra Grant. Together, they walk the red carpets not as Hollywood royalty demanding attention, but as two artists who have simply found a quiet, deeply satisfying harbor in each other's arms. He looks at her with the gentle, awestruck reverence of a man who thought he would never, ever be allowed to experience the warmth of the sun again. When we step back and look at the absolute totality of his 61 years on Earth, the poetic symmetry of his life comes into perfect, breathtaking focus. The boy who was abandoned by his father in Beirut grew up to become the most fiercely loyal man in an industry famous for betrayal. The teenager who struggled to read the words on a chalkboard because of a severe dyslexia grew up to deliver the most profound, articulate philosophy on live television. And the man who lost his own family grew up to become the surrogate, comforting brother to an entire world of strangers. Keanu Reeves is the ultimate cinematic savior, not because he played Neo in the Matrix and not because he played the invincible assassin in John Wick. He is the savior because he showed us how to survive the unbearable brutality of the real world without losing our humanity. He taught us that when the universe strips your hands of everything you ever wanted to hold, you do not clench your fists in anger. You leave your hands open. You use them to help someone else carry their bags on the subway. You use them to hold the door open for a stranger. You use them to paint, to write, to ride, and eventually, when the long winter is finally over, you use them to hold the hand of the person who loves your scars. The billion-dollar box office receipts will eventually fade into the dusty archives of Hollywood history. The action movies will be remade by younger generations. But the legacy of Keanu Reeves is entirely untouchable. He is the ghost who refused to haunt us, and the broken man who spent his entire life putting the rest of the world back together. He is the saint of the silver screen. And as he rides his motorcycle into the golden, fading light of the California sun, his heart is finally, beautifully, and permanently at peace. As Keanu Reeves reminds us, we cannot control the tragedies life hands us, but we absolutely control how they shape our hearts. Pain can make us bitter, or it can make us infinitely more compassionate. What about you? During the darkest chapters of your own life, how did you stop your heart from turning to stone? Please share your stories of survival in the comments below. If this journey of unbreakable gentleness moved you, please leave a like, share this video, and subscribe for more untold stories behind the legends. Remember, grief is just love enduring. Stay kind.